everybody for coming. My name is Kate Bonner, and I'm with the Federal Government Affairs team based up in McLean and M1. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our special guest, Congressman Brat, also for coming. We really host these Meet the Candidate events to bring elected officials and in election years their opponents in the elections to the associates at our various facilities. And it's been very successful here in Richmond, so we wanted to bring Congressman Brat back for the election coming up on Tuesday, November 6th. And I double-checked, October 15th is the last day you can register to vote in Virginia. So if you have not registered to vote yet, we encourage you to do that. And then definitely vote on Tuesday, November 6th. We asked folks to submit questions ahead of time. We had a lot of questions on the same sort of general topics. So what we did was group those questions together. So if you ask a question, we don't say your name, we probably looped you in with somebody else. And if we did use your name, just first names, and your question wasn't exactly what I said, that's because we sort of were putting a bunch of questions together. But I hope we've reflected the questions that everybody wanted to ask accurately. So next I'm going to introduce Rob Alexander, who will introduce Congressman Brat for us. Rob is the Chief Information Officer here at Capital One, based here in Richmond. He's responsible for all of our technology activities. He serves on our executive committee, and he ensures alignment of technology initiatives with strategic business priorities. So please join me in welcoming Rob to the stage.
All right, well, thank you, Kate. That was great. I've got a longer resume. If you want to read that next time, I can give you the full version. Awesome. Wow, outstanding turnout. So this is great. So thanks so much for being here. It's really exciting to see all of our associates taking an interest in the upcoming elections. So I'd like to start by thanking Kate and our Government and Policy Affairs team for setting up this forum. I consider voting in our elections to be an important responsibility as citizens of this country, and it's even better if you're an informed voter. So thanks, Kate, for this opportunity for us to all be informed, and also an opportunity to provide input to our elected officials. The federal government plays a crucial role in issues that affect Capital One, that affect all of you, and that affect your families. These kinds of sessions at Capital One can have a huge impact. We're the 5th largest employer in Virginia, with over 19,000 associates working in the Commonwealth and 7,000 living here in the 7th District. Our guest today is our representative for the 7th District, Congressman Dave Brat. He's serving his 2nd term in the House of Representatives, and he sits on the Budget, Education and Workforce, and Small Business Committees, which are all very relevant topics for us. Prior to being elected to Congress, Representative Brat taught economics at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland and chaired the Economics and Business Department. Representative Brat earned an undergraduate degree at Hope College in Michigan, a master's degree in divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, and a PhD in economics from American University. He and his wife Laura live in Henrico County with their 2 children. He is running for a 3rd term this November. We are happy to have him here to talk about the campaign and to answer questions submitted by our associates. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Dave Brat.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Good enough. Well, thank you all for coming out. How many of you have ever heard me before? Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, good. I just like to go over how I think as a politician, as a professor for 20 years, etc. So I went to Princeton Seminary. I don't know if anybody in the room heard of James Madison. Familiar Virginian, wrote the Constitution, fairly important. And he went to Princeton Seminary, also roughly speaking. College in New Jersey was called. Stuck around, first graduate student, stuck around, studied what? Let's see if anybody is a Jeopardy winner here. Hebrew, kind of interesting. I could go off on a lecture of that. If that's your worldview, how would you write a constitution? You'd separate powers, right? So the reason I bring this up is because if you put Mr. Madison together, who argued you should have a large number of small factions competing against each other, right? That would be a good government. And federal had 18 enumerated powers. All remaining powers were supposed to remain with the states and localities. I still believe that. So when we're doing the billions up there, a lot of it, opioids I'll get into and all that later on. And not much of it's getting down to our local law enforcement officials, right? The Henrico Sheriff, the Chesterfield Sheriff. I got 10 counties It's a major problem across it. And then at the federal level, you're supposed to separate power, and we run every 2 years, right? So the legislature is Article 1 in the Constitution, and then Article 2 and 3 is the executive and the Supreme Court judiciary. And all power has now moved into the executive branch because Congress has learned how not to vote on things, right? Now how to shield yourself from tough questions. So that's on the Madisonian piece, and then on the Adam Smith piece, you all probably, how many of you had Adam Smith in college? Everybody, I thank God, I hope, please. And so Smith had the exact same, right? They're both Enlightenment scholars, highest intellectual caliber, et cetera. And Smith had the same logic on economics. They have the best economic system. This is Econ 101, right? You want a large number of small firms competing against each other. How are we doing on that now in DC? No, you guys you're safe. You're intermediate, so I'm not. You're not the bigs. Intermediates are okay. But if you just look at the industries, right? Amazon, Facebook are in the news lately, a bunch of issues, automobiles, airlines, health insurance, how many options you have there, how's that working for you, right? So the logic it goes on and on and on, right? Less competition, less choice, etc. And so if you put Madison and Adam Smith together, you can predict 99% of my votes. So that's what I'd just like to start off telling people that. I ran on those principles. I vote on those principles. You go look up my NFIB score, National Federation of Independent Businesses. I'm 100. Right? Folks from other parties will say they're pro-business. Go look at their score. We've got a few senators here. You can go Google them. 20 and 34 out of 100. Right? And so this is banking. So you can give me some banking questions too. But I'll just get into the economy. The campaign for me should be the story. Larry Kudlow is the president's chief economic advisor. Known him for years, way back when. Now I get to see him here and there. He said the news story of 2018 is this economy that is booming that everyone said could never happen. Right? Just a few years ago, who'd you have? You had all of the economists saying you got to just get used to the new normal. Let's be like Europe, sclerotic arteries, 2% growth, and that's it. That's all you can achieve. Right? There's technical factors that explain why you can't get above 2. And the post-war average is 3.5, right? Percent GDP growth per year. Now we're growing at 4.2 last quarter, and the Atlanta Fed has us growing at 4.6 next quarter. It's through the roof, right? So the Democrats called it, Pelosi called it Armageddon. If you did tax cuts, it'd be Armageddon, right? So I think that's politics. I know her. She's not shows. Hi, Dave. We get along, right? We all get along fine, right? So it's not personal. But she said tax cuts would be Armageddon. Is 4.6 GDP growth Armageddon? No. And then they'll make up stuff and they'll say, well, all the money's going to go to stock buybacks. Nope, not true. Go look at the data. By far and away, the huge percentage gain is capital equipment. And when I did my PhD, I did economic growth. And guess what the greatest determinant of economic growth is? Capital accumulation. Number 1, right? And then human capital and technology, et cetera, right? 2, 3, 4. So now we're putting more capital in the hands of every worker. And when you put more capital in the hands of the American worker, what happens to their productivity? You work with a little bit of capital here, all of you in this room. How's your pay here? Nice correlation, isn't it? I thought of that on my own. That was, right? Capital, wages, right? And in macroeconomics, productivity overall is the wage rate, right? It's an identity. So in August, capital accumulation is going up, wage rate's up 3%, median income's up huge, and every economic indicator I know of is up. Consumer optimism, Michigan indexes through the roof. Manufacturing indexes through the roof. NFIB, small business index, through the roof, higher than even during the Reagan era. And just to show you that this is not partisan, John F. Kennedy and I are like this lately. Right? So it's not partisan. JFK, nice, proud Catholic, national sovereignty, no issues, da-da-da-da. Supply side tax cuts, and what happened? Boom. He said the best way to get revenues flowing into the federal coffers through tax cuts. So it's supply side tax cuts, that's what happened. So right now, our revenues are up 4%, spending is up 8%. That's the problem, right? So the spending piece is the problem. I'll give you a little bit on the tax cuts. I'm proud of that thing. I said 2 years ago and prior in writings just what orthodox economics would say, right? I did my PhD on Man-Q, and Man-Q copied Solow, who won the Nobel Prize in Economic Growth. So that's the line of thought that I come out of. And I said, if you do tax cuts, so we're going to have growth of 3 to 4. Right? A few years ago, many years ago, whatever. And that's what's happened. And so the mainstream media, when we did the tax cuts a year ago, they discovered this new term that I'd never heard from the mainstream media. It was called deficits. When the Republicans did tax cuts, for the first time the mainstream media discovered deficits. The tax cuts were going to cost $150 billion. Blow a hole in the deficit. Ruin the fiscal stance. Brat, aren't you serious on the fiscal side? Well, it turns out if you grow over 3, they're all paid for, $150 billion. Right? If you're growing at 4, they're for sure paid for. We're growing at 4 now, right? So tax cuts all paid for, and then fast forward 6 months later, and to get 9 Senate Democrat votes, because we need 9 Senate Democrats votes to pass the budget, we had to plus up the budget $400 billion in pure spending, not paid for. Anybody hear that in the newspaper? No. So 150 deficit concerns paid for now, right? You had to have faith that tax cuts would do what they're advertised to do, and it's happened. And then 400 billion spending through the roof, right? And so the spending, I think we can do much better doing some block grant stuff, pushing money back down to states and localities. We're 21 trillion in debt. Who's going to pay that bill off? We're spending, right? We currently raise 3 and spend 4 trillion per year. 3/4 of which is entitlement mandatory, right? Medicare, Social Security, all that. We'll get into some of that. But the kids are going to pay it off, right? So they're going to have to go get a job, pay their own taxes, et cetera, and then 21 trillion in our spending on their backs. That's one of the key reasons I got into office, right? I taught college for 20 years, economics and business. And so that's overview of economics. The most important piece, which I go on the TV once in a while and I talk about, and then the press rolls their eyes, and I don't get it, and you guys play a role in this, is economic education. That's what I did for 20 years or more. And right now, kids are coming out of K to 12, and they don't know what a business is. For real, right? I mean, I taught freshman economics for 20 years. Kids don't know what a price is, or a cost, or a profit, or an entrepreneur, accounting, etc. Right? They don't know the basic terms of economics. And so half of those kids won't go on to college. So we just spent $14,000 a year per student for 13 years, and they don't know what a business is. And half of the kids won't go to college. So we've got to get to work on that. So K-12 education, we did some reforms on the education committee last year. Less of the top-down testing, right? Less SOLs. So we now mandate just English and math, not everything else. So it frees up the teachers to motivate the kids and get them excited about career paths, career and technical, all sorts of things. That you first have to have an idea, why am I on the planet, right? What's the purpose? What do I want to do with my life? What's my career path? Then memorizing the isosceles triangle might make sense, right? You got to first have some plan of attack, like what am I interested in doing? Then learning can be fun. And so we're making that happening. And then on top of that, the purpose piece is missing from K to 12. Kids come out, and this is not on the teachers. The teachers are the salt of the earth, right? We're mandating all of these courses in SOL, high-stakes testing. How many of you have kids? So I don't need to tell you, right? 3rd grade, super testing, 8th grade, super testing, 11th grade, super test. They also come out after graduating from high school. They don't know, and I taught philosophy and theology and ethics and whatever, right? They don't know any ethical system of thought, very little on religious systems of thought, and no philosophical systems of thought out of high school. And those traditionally, right, this is Socrates, right? So just Greek pure reason 2,400 years ago. The fundamental question of education is, what is a good life? What does a good life look like? And today, for 13 years, we don't even ask the question. And we don't pursue it rigorously with reason. And so we got some heavy lifting to do. I think all of you in this room have excelled, and I know how many tests you got to probably take to get into this place, I've heard. So you're all impressive people. I get it. But we need to pump up everybody. So the economy's moving. We have more job openings now than people see. But it's still not good enough because we have 40 million Americans in working age still out of the workforce. That's a major problem. So, right, we have a great opportunity to pump people up, get everybody into the workforce, get the economy humming even more. And with that, I guess I'll take whatever questions you got. Thank you.
Okay, have a seat.
Oh, we get to sit for this?
Oh, we get to sit.
Thank you. I hope I wore good socks.
Well, I'm happy to report that a lot of our questions touch on some of the topics you already mentioned, so this is going to be good. Okay, so we're going to start with a question from Daniel. What do you think should be done with immigration reform, and will Congress ever pass comprehensive immigration reform?
Yeah, I mean, that one's pretty easy. It's not easy to cover in a few minutes. How long do I got for each of these?
A couple minutes.
A couple minutes, right? So, if you want to go do your homework, go look up the Goodlatte bill. Goodlatte's head of judiciary from Virginia. He's been working on it for 20, 30 years, right? So it's good policy. It will solve the problem. It's non-ideological. It's a hot-button issue. But basically, E-Verify, border control, visa overstays are over half the issue, and there's good rational ways to solve it. It's all in the Goodlatte bill. We pushed for it. We got about 195 votes. We needed to get to 218. And so we were close. The Senate, we weren't too hopeful would get to it. But that's on immigration reform, that's the key piece. And for some reason, the D's, Obama campaigned on all that. E-Verify, he's on the record, go Google him. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barbara Jordan, great civil rights leader, campaigned on all this because she was against cheap wages, cheap labor, on behalf of African American, Hispanics, etc. And so, all in favor, we should have had it, should have been a slam dunk, but we could not get the Democrats to come on board. And we did the compromise, right? The DACA kids, 800,000 was in the Goodlatte bill. And so we compromised out of the shadows in the workforce, legal status, and then Trump jacked it from 800,000 to 1.7 million DACA. Covered everybody. And the D's wouldn't say yes. And so you can go research, that if you're interested and see if I'm fudging, but I don't think I'm fudging. So there was a solution sitting there right within reach. We compromised, couldn't get the agreement, and so that's where we ended.
So no vote by the end of the year?
No.
Okay.
It's there may be there's another smaller bill with E-Verify and some ag immigration in it. That Goodlatte's pushing on. That's fine too.
So maybe that.
That could pass. Yep, before November.
Okay. Okay, we have a question from Susan. Where do you stand on the role of the federal government in protecting the environment, and do you think states should step up and play a part?
Yeah, everybody should play a part. For me, in economics, I worked at the World Bank, right? When I was up doing my PhD at American, I worked at the World Bank, the environment, education section. I worked at the Philippines. I worked in sub-Saharan Africa. The biggest correlation for a clean environment is a growing, healthy economy. All the rich capitalist countries have the cleanest air and clean water, right? So right off the bat, everybody I know in this room wants clean air and clean water. And you express that, you go with it. So up in Congress, I signed on to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, all the bills that come before us, like that I'm on. And so there's some partisan stuff, that people want to say, Republicans don't care about the environment, but I don't buy the split. I like clean water, I like clean air. Capitalist countries and wealthy folks have the best ability to get that done, and we do, right? China's an example of a country right now that's growing at 7 or 8%, but you can't see your hand in front of your face. And so they'll get there, right? As income per capita grows, it'll happen. And while I'm on that, because the greatest increase in human welfare has happened while you've been living, that dwarfs any prior increase in human welfare in all of human history. And that is the increase in human welfare in China and India over the last 20 years. When I started teaching economics, Indians and Chinese, 2.5 billion people right now, were making $1,000 a year per capita income. Now they're up to roughly 10,000. That is by far the greatest increase in human welfare that's ever happened in human history by multiples, right? Hundreds or thousands. And so it's important to ask the question, what brought that about? And it's the move away from central planning. And communism in China, and India had a more traditional system, and it moved toward free markets and democracy, etc. And that has unleashed growth that was unimaginable. And so that's my Madisonian, Adam Smithian, and sometimes it's conservatives are put on the ringer for not caring when the evidence is the exact opposite. The greatest human welfare increases have come precisely because you've established the rule of law and a free market system, which has to be agreed upon socially. Okay.
This is a good one too. Question from Grayson. I'm concerned about Social Security having the funding to pay benefits when I retire in 40 years. If Grayson's here, huge thumbs up. He's already thinking about his retirement.
Yeah.
He says, I'm currently saving separately, assuming that I'm not going to get a benefit from the program. What do you think the future, another round of applause, everybody should be saving. Everybody should be saving for their retirement. What do you think the future of Social Security should be, and we'll start there. What do you think the future holds for Social Security?
Yeah, it's going to be a rough one. That one's going to require bipartisan behind closed doors to fix, right? Social Security is a major problem. It's insolvent in 2034. Medicare is in way worse shape. Medicare is insolvent in 2026, 8 years away. And so Social Security you can solve by moving percentage points, 1 or 2%. Medicare you cannot. So Medicare is the first one, the big one. We have to fix them all. In the Tax 2.0, our leadership sent out the Universal Savings Account Plan. And I asked the chairman of Ways and Means, I said, is that my bill? And he said, yeah, that's your bill. I said, well, thanks for telling me. So I'm helping you save, right? It's pre-tax savings accounts. I have HSAs to help you pay for medical insurance policies, prescription drugs, doctor care through HSAs, pre-tax. So on the employer side, if you're covered, some people aren't. And so the HSAs do that. Universal savings accounts, same basic idea. Your savings grow pre-tax and help you save for this contingency. So we have to solve this problem. We all have to get in a room. The entitlement mandatory programs are between 2/3 and 3/4 of the entire budget. Right? So the discretionary budget is about $1 trillion, a little over now. And the non-discretionary is $3 trillion a year. And growing, right? And healthcare is a major part, driver of it. So we have to fix all of it. I've gone in, there's people know about it, but it takes a political backbone. And in DC, you don't get rewarded for saying it's time to eat spinach, right? It's just if you say yes, yes, yes to everything in DC, you get rewarded. And that's an upside down incentive structure when it comes to politics. Because it leads to exactly to what you're seeing is insolvency of major programs. So we got to solve them. We got to get the kids involved to understand these issues. So you guys are involved in economic literacy and keep it going. That's the solution. They have to become engaged because we're putting the debt and these burdens on them. And time's running short.
What are some specifics you think have to change with Social Security? A lot of times people talk about either income testing or raising the age requirements for Social Security. Are there any of those you definitely support or oppose?
That's why you got to behind closed doors. No one's going to do unilateral disarmament on that. So the general principle doesn't take a physics PhD to solve. Both programs were actuarially sound in the 60s when they were founded. The average death age was 65, which actuarially means half past before and half past after, so it breaks even. Now the same programs exist, the payouts are at 65 or 67, but the average death age is 83. So they're insolvent, right? So that the people have to make up their minds on how they want it. It's a democracy. I don't get to dictate. We have to listen to the people, and they have to say, are we going to step up to save the next generation? Are we willing to do that or not? And I'm going to leave that to the people.
Okay. Well, since you mentioned Medicare, we did have a few healthcare questions. So
sure.
we sort of smushed them together into one because we'll give you an extra couple of minutes to answer them. We're interested on your thoughts on how to improve the current healthcare system particularly how to make it more affordable.
Right.
In your role as a federal elected official.
Yes. In general, the price system and competition is what makes goods better and more affordable. We do not have a market system working hardly at all at the federal government level. And so under Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, the promise was you could keep your doctor, you could keep your health insurance company, and the price would go down. I had town halls across all 10 counties during August with all 10 counties. Anyone that wanted to make an appointment, I met with. Democrats, independents come in, Republicans, same exact story from everybody. I have this condition, I have one insurance company to choose from, I have one prescription drug, I have to buy at that price, there's no shopping, and my doctor has nothing to do with any of these decisions. Right? And so I try to solve the problem, but the problem is systemic. It's built into a top-down system that's driving this, right? And so at the federal level, which is not the way I like to solve problems. And so the way you solve that is you have to break up the monopoly, the socialized aspect of healthcare, and go back to market delivery. And that does not mean you have to get rid of pre-existing conditions or all that, right? On the Obamacare side, on the individual market side, I held up a bill at my debate, and I told the media, please, in the text of our bill, pre-existing conditions stayed in. And yet the press did not want to put that out, right? So it's not hard to do both, right? You can move the risk of pre-existing condition folks into one piece, and then you can have the market work for the 175 million people that have employer-provided health insurance. You don't have to mud it all up with being run top-down by the federal government. The federal government does not have a good track record of running businesses, right? It's good to provide these safety net guarantees in law. That is a good function of government, but not running the business, right? You look at most businesses that are run by the government, it's not the best performance in the world. You can look across countries to see that. So it gets back to Madison and Adam Smith, and what should you do? You need to break up the bigs, and you have to have competition. And when you go get an MRI or any procedure, you should be able to shop prices and know what they are, and get information on the procedures and on the prescription drugs. And all of that will take, right, and this is not easy, you have to take on big insurance to get that done. Is that going to happen in DC right now? 10 years ago, when the insurance folks walked into the White House, you may have noticed they were looking at their shoes. Do you remember that? There was a reason for that. They were getting more enrollees, but they knew the system they were setting up, and now we're living under it. So premiums under Obamacare have gone up 150% in the last 6 years. So if you want affordable, that's not affordable, right? Premiums up 150% in 6 years. And everybody tells me, right? I go out to small business owners, they cannot pay the bill. They used to provide most all of their employees health care insurance. Then it went to 50%, then to 20%, and now nothing. In a lot of cases. Right? And that's a small business experience. That's what they're telling me. Right? And you go, I always tell the news media, don't trust me. Right? I'm a politician. Go call the first 100 people in your phone book and ask them. Call the first 100 small businesses. Say, how has Obamacare been for your business? And they'll say, I cannot afford to deliver health care anymore. And there is a confusion between health care and health insurance. So under Obamacare, the system, a lot of people now have health insurance policies, but they have a $5,000 deductible. And I think your industry knows that most recent economic studies, the average person has about $500 in savings. So you have a health insurance policy with a $5,000 deductible, and on average $500 in savings. And how does that work? You don't have health care. You have health insurance, but you don't get health care. And so it might sound nice, it's not working. So back to first principles on economics.
Correct. Well, I'm not glad, but you mentioned heavily regulated industry, so I don't know if the crowd's aware. Banking in the United States is the second most regulated industry. Does anybody know what the first most regulated industry is? Nuclear power, which is great. That's good. I think we agree with that. But healthcare, not ahead of us, surprisingly. But so we are a very heavily regulated industry, as you know.
Yeah.
We're sort of curious about, with the new, not so new administration anymore, though, your assessment of the regulatory environment they've provided, and if you can comment on the recent banking bill that went through Congress.
Yeah, the Choice Act under Hensarling wasn't everything we wanted. Hensarling wasn't happy with it, but we got part of the loaf, so that's the way it works in D.C. On regulation, I don't know if you'll be surprised. If you're a politician, you go door-to-door knocking. If you ask the average person, do you want more or less regulation? Guess what they say on average? More. Right? And so in your industry, maybe you get what regulation looks like and how it slows down and impacts paperwork and healthcare. I know it's hard to believe. I've been to more small healthcare deliveries, doctor's offices, whatever, and everybody working in the back rooms says, how's the paperwork? And it's just, they cannot manage the paperwork. They seriously cannot manage it. And they're all scared of lawsuits if they do anything wrong. Right? And so it's inhibiting business. So the White House has done most of the heavy lifting on that. We've done in the House, we've done a lot. We've got 800 bills waiting over in the Senate. The Senate is just, they get 6-year terms and they need spinal cords. Right? They have no political courage. Right? 6 years and they won't take any tough votes on anything to fix things. And on regs, we've done some good stuff on small business. I can name a few things off. But the White House gets most of the credit for that. They've done 17 or 18 heavy lifts on deregulation. It's showing up in economic growth. I haven't, right? Regs, they are complex, right? You should be doing benefit cost studies on the regs, right? What are the benefits of the reg and what's the cost? And very rarely you see that in play, right? Too often politics dominates. And just to go back to 2008, the financial crisis is a misnomer. The great financial crisis started only in one sector, without which you would not have had a financial crisis. And where did it start? Where did the financial crisis start? In housing, right? So the Fed printed too much money. You can go back and look at Milton Friedman, right? Friedman's monetary rule, or John Taylor, the Taylor rule at Stanford. He's the world's expert on all of this. And he's got the Taylor rule and how much money should have been printed, and they goofed, the Fed goofed. The maestro, Greenspan, I loved him, but he totally goofed. So you have too much money, too much liquidity, it's got to find home, so it went searching for the highest return, and it went to housing. And housing, banking, you used to do banking, bankers used to analyze risk of all things. What a crazy idea, that bankers would analyze risk. Right? In the old days, Farmer Joe and Mary or whoever, and they had a good reputation, and they had some assets, and they had income growth for 20 years, and might have been at the margin, but you knew them, and they were ethical, so the bank would say, yep, I know them, they're good. We'll give you a loan. Bank can make a decision. Hard decision. And if they screwed up, the bank lost their money. What an idea. Wow, that worked for only 200 years. Right? And then we got real clever. We put Fannie and Freddie in place. The banks now make mortgages, don't do any analysis. There were ninja loans, liar loans, whatever loans, right? You remember all this? Is it coming back? Banks get their fee, put all the risk on Fannie and Freddie. That's a neat trick. If you put all the risk on Fannie and Freddie, where are you really putting the risk? On you, the taxpayer, on the American people. And you pay the bill. Right? So when you talk about regulations, right, a lot of times, and this has not been explained to people, right? You got to read pretty heavy to understand that story. But when you talk about regulations, Fannie and Freddie, that's a lot of regulations. And everyone says, well, that's good. Fannie and Freddie, thank God they're regulating the housing market and the financial markets and all that. No, it's not. It's a disaster, and it caused the financial crisis. And we're still coming out of it. Right? So it's hard to explain this stuff, but that's the truth of the story.
You just said that the banks package did.
Hold on, we're not going to take questions from the audience because then we'll get all derailed. But since we've talked about, you've mentioned the economy several times. Obviously, you're an economics professor, so you know this stuff. We have a question from Sean about budget deficits.
Yep.
And you mentioned in your opening remarks the deficit. How do you propose getting us to a balanced budget, paying down the national debt, but without disrupting a growing economy, which we do have right now?
That's a tough
Sounds lovely.
How do you create heaven? Easy question. That's a hard one. And so, I mean, I covered it. the major problem we have is we're spending beyond our means, right? So no family gets to do this. I hope you're all teaching kids about family budget constraints at the micro level. And the same thing should apply at the macro level, right? If you run into a real problem, right, then you can do a little Keynesian priming of the pump, which I don't really like. But even Keynes, who's considered, kind of moderate or a liberal economist, he's a brilliant guy, right? He said, you still, in the good years, what are you supposed to do if you're rational? Run a surplus, so that in the down cycle of the business cycle, you can do some stimulus spending. Well, we've been doing near $1 trillion deficits. That's hugely stimulative. And since the financial crisis, the monetary policy's been zero, right? Interest rates, roughly speaking. And they have $4.5 trillion in their vaults, right? And high-powered money stimulating the QE and et cetera. So the real economy over the past 10 years has not been real, right? It's been on a sugar high. And so that's nice, right? You've been living beyond your means for a decade, and if you had the fundamentals, you would not have had as good of a life. And that's up to you. Do we keep doing that? And eventually the bond market's going to step in, right? That is the answer. You don't get to cheat forever in economics, right? So we're at 80% debt to GDP. China, by the way, is at 250 debt to GDP right now. They're more fragile than you think, but they have a 35% savings rate, and ours is like 4 or 5 or something, right? So they can mandate, because it's a communist system, so they can force the money to go where they need to in investment, whatever. We cannot do that. So our bond market will correct when it gets too out of hand, and it's coming. Now, we're not there yet, right? People always, on the conservative side, we got a lot of people, the sky is falling, it's Armageddon and whatever. I said, no, don't get that nervous. We have plenty of good evidence that you can be fairly pathetic for 30 years. And they said, well, what's that, Dave? What's that evidence? I said, that's called Europe. Right? So you can be fiscally irresponsible for quite a long time. And I'm still amazed, right? The Germans and French, they still have 2% productivity. They're still growing. But Americans aren't content with that, and our spending can't bear it. And so growth is the obvious key also. Okay? So growth gets your way out of the deficits and the debt. Growth is the key, and it's the key to shoring up Social Security and Medicare. If we continue to grow at 3.5, 4, 4.5, it's huge. If you don't, then you really have some belt tightening to do.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the House has had a vote on the balanced budget amendment this cycle, right? Yeah, I don't think so. So that question was about just passing a balanced budget. What are your thoughts on the balanced budget amendment and any future for that?
I ran on it. I promised I'd do it, so I did it. So I put in a balanced budget amendment. It got 45 out of 450. I promised term limits. It got 45 out of 450. I kept my word. Madisonian, it's whatever, right? But it's the Fox Garden hen house, right? The incentives are a little messed up. I'm one of the few people that just went to Congress because the people sent me, right? A lot of people are professional politicians over a long term. So it's harder to do than you would think.
Okay, so bringing it back to something you mentioned in your opening remarks that touches on a growing deficit. Congress just passed a tax reform package.
Yeah.
President signed it into law late last year.
Yep.
Do you see any really obvious changes that need to be made still in the tax code, post-tax reform, or fixes that need to come out of that? And what do you see as the results of that tax bill, really, both nationally but here in Virginia, too?
Sure. I'm bipartisan. I agree 100% with all the Democrats. Wow. What? We need to make them permanent. Can you feel the irony building here? So when we passed the tax cuts, because of the Senate scoring rules, we could do the corporate rates, but didn't have enough in terms of scoring to make the business, the corporate rate, and small business, S-corps, permanent. So now we're going to make those permanent. All the Democrat presidential contenders and all the big names said, back when we were doing it, you got to make all that permanent. And so I agree fully with my Democrat counterparts. Now it's time to make them permanent. So we're going to do that in Tax 2.0. and the Democrats are going to vote no on it. So that's why there's a little cynicism, right? So they say for political scoring points, you got to make it permanent. That's a dig at us, so we're not doing something right on it. So now we're saying, okay, now it's time. Let's make them all permanent for the small business. For the individual, let's make them permanent. And so, yes, we got to do that. And my savings bill is in that as well, in Tax 2.0. So I'd love that to go through. And you had a second part of that. And what has been the impact of that? The impact, if you go around the district, every firm I go to has hired a new person. That doesn't sound huge, but if every firm does that, it's huge. Every small business can hire a new person. Perhaps someone they had to let go a year or two ago. They're hiring or buying a new pickup truck, a new forklift, light capital equipment. They're making upgrades all around the horn, regardless of industry, right? The capital-intensive industries are booming. And so, yeah, it's widespread.
Okay, so that's a good segue to the next question. Martha had asked us how you keep a pulse on what's happening in this congressional district.
Sure.
And how do you take whatever constituents tell you is most important to them and sort of go work on that in Washington?
Yep. Yeah, so usually I just had town halls. For the first couple of years, they were not that eventful. Once in a while, they'd be a little fun or whatever, exciting. But the last couple of years, the left has gotten irrationally exuberant, to quote Greenspan again. And so I try to have normal town halls, and you can go Google them and see them, people yelling, screaming, swearing, whatever. So it's not productive. So then I had to say, how do I meet? So I've had 500 constituent meetings over this cycle. And there's a way of seeing whether I'm lying. It's called Facebook, right? So my newspaper has not, they're selected in when they want to follow Facebook. But all the evidence is there everywhere I've been, right? I've been to every fair, Rotary meeting, this kids, military, every event, parade imaginable. And then in August, I was home, so I went through all 10 counties and had meetings with every constituent who wanted to sign up for meetings. Right? And so that's how I try to stay in tune. I try to read everything. The district sent me there. I'm pretty clear. And you know, some of this partisan stuff, I do agree with Bernie. You know, the arbiter, if you want to look at, JFK, right? I'm okay with him. But even Bernie on the bigs, right? Taking on, he's got kind of a contradiction in there, right? Because he wants socialism, which is the ultimate big, right? So I don't like that piece. But his attack on corruption, right? And on the big elites and the cronies in D.C., right? And just think of trade right now, right? I think everybody's finally learning about trade. And so I'm a free trader and free markets are great and all that kind of thing, right? In theory, and the performance is good. But you go look at trade, now there's a guy at Virginia Tech, he's top in the country, right? Senior guy, ambassador, negotiator. And he sat down with me a few years ago and he showed me these. The trade accounts are by sector, by good, traded and negotiated. And then you select the wage rate and the labor standards that go with every sector and every good. I mean, it's so far from free markets, you can't even make it up. And so what's wrong with that is, guess who gets to decide what the wage rate or the price or the cost of your good and the labor standards that go with your good or sector are going to be? Us. And then lobbyists are in the middle of every single one of those decisions. And that's true for the rest of the economy, right? If you've got a lobbyist that can get you a line in the budget, that can be $1 billion for you, right? So that's pretty rational. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. Every sector comes to us, right? Banking, hospitals, fire, police, first responders, manufacturing, everybody. Everybody's learned now, if you want to get your hand on the billion numbers, right, because we're in the trillions, don't go to the state government, don't go to local. Get a lobbyist and go up to D.C. And if you can lock in a contract by getting one line put in a bill, you're loaded. And it's locked in by government, right, permanency, by law. Not bad if you can get it. See why everybody's hiring lawyers and lobbyists? And is that what you want? Right? That is crony capitalism or patronage politics. You go around the world and study third world countries, right? That are poor, that's what they have in place. Right? So-and-so's relative handles bananas, so-and-so handles cocoa, so-and-so handles this. Right? You just read any standard development economic book. And if you move toward that, your growth goes away.
Okay. We're going to get into a couple of the last questions here. It's a little bit more miscellaneous, but you mentioned earlier on the Education and Workforce Committee, specifically Capital One as a big technology company, we're very interested in STEM education.
Good.
So we're curious what the committee has been doing on STEM education, and then also on top of that, making sure that kids with a variety of needs in the school system are getting what they need.
Right. No, I applaud you on that. That's great. Just so you know the basic structure of things, the Fed does about 10% of education funding, right? And we do mandates. The states don't exactly like it when we do that. So we do the mandates, but we don't fund them, right? So the states and localities fund education 90%. And then in Virginia, you have a composite index, right, that weighs how much the state ratio is to the local ratio based on income or kids on meals or et cetera. They'll use some index there. And so that's the funding piece, right? And so I love the STEM piece. And whenever I go to anyone in a poor part of a county or a rich part of the county,